Welcome to the Volunteer Nation podcast, bringing you practical tips and big ideas on how to build, grow, and scale volunteer talent. I'm your host, Tobi Johnson, and if you rely on volunteers to fuel your charity, cause, membership, or movement, I made this podcast just for you. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Volunteer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Tobi Johnson, and I'm on the road today. I had to leave my house because we're packing up, getting ready to move, and I really wanted to have this conversation today, so I decamped, went to my husband's office or office building, and we're not even sure if this is going to work well. So I'm hoping it does. Let's hope the quality is good. If it's a little bit not as good as usual, I hope you'll be just give us a little grace there. But I really wanted to have this conversation about volunteer leadership stories. It's with Catherine Huckaby, who has just written a book called Nobody Starts Ready, How Ordinary People Make a Real Difference Where They Live. I'm going to introduce Catherine in a minute, but I just want to say welcome to Catherine.
Thank
Well,
you.
So I'm going to introduce her. We've been talking about leadership here and there on the pod. If you'll recall, I had my friend Jenny Field on for episode 160 and 161 on leadership principles for sparking change. So check those out. I'll post those links in the show notes. But it's been a really interesting time to think about volunteer leadership. We found in our volunteer management progress report, and I'll link to that as well in the show notes, that many organizations are not yet leveraging the full power of volunteer leadership. That, at least half of nonprofits or nearly half of nonprofits that we surveyed only really leveraged volunteers. Less than 5% of their workforce was volunteer leaders. And so I really want to talk about leadership, want to talk about how people are getting involved, want to hear those volunteer leadership stories from Catherine. And as you all know, if you are a listener who's been with me for a while, I've been working on a book for volunteers who lead forever and a day. But guess what? I'm actually making plans to clear my schedule this summer, and we are going to take a hiatus on the pod. Now, we're not taking that hiatus right away. We still have many episodes scheduled. I'll let you know when that episode comes, but we have another month of content still. But I am going to take a short summer hiatus to just focus entirely on this book because it needs to be written. So stay tuned for that. I'm looking forward to sharing our progress as I go. But let's get down to what we're up to today, Volunteer Leadership Stories with Catherine Huckaby. Now, Catherine Huckaby is Executive Director of Community Positive. And as I said, she's the author of Nobody Starts Ready, How Ordinary People Make a Real Difference Where They Live. She spent more than 2 decades leading communications and community engagement programs. So she's talking your talk, y'all. Her focus was building the systems that connect neighbors with their local government and designing them so participation works for everyone, not just the insiders who already know how things run. I've been saying this for a while, right? We need to make sure we bring that community into our organizations because they actually have valuable insights that we don't know about. She later moved on to an executive role with a public safety oversight agency where she saw community from the inside of public policy and accountability. Through the Community Positive Project, she has interviewed hundreds of volunteers, public servants, and elected officials across the U.S. and Canada about what actually works in building engaged communities. Those conversations became the foundation for her book. And so she writes and speaks about volunteer engagement, community trust, and how people get started in civic life without burning out. This is good, y'all. She also holds a BA in political science and history and an MPA, and she is a trained family mediator. She lives in Texas with her family. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you for having me.
This is great. And I think the special emphasis, I think for some of you who are listening, you're either working in private charities, you're working in grassroots organizing, or you're working in a public sector, whether it be a federal, state, or local organization that is involving the community. I think this conversation will apply to all. So let's get started. I always like to kick off, Catherine, with how people sort of got into what they do. In particular, tell us how you got into the world of community engagement. What's your birth story?
My birth story is that I was not raised in a family that volunteered
Mhm.
I think like most people that I meet, their family was going to work, paying bills, raising the kids, and just living life. And the concept of actually going and volunteering in the community, serving in some capacity, was just not something that I saw
Mm.
until I got married and had my first child, and we were in church, and someone said, "You know what? I think you would be great doing this." And I just remember being so hesitant and young. I was 20 years old, and I
Mhm.
no one needs me to do any of these things, and I'm not qualified. And that really kind of started a snowball effect into where I started raising my hand and offering up different ideas and suggestions about how to do different things into my local PTA. I ended up being one of those lovely PTA presidents that everyone talks about. But all of those different situations really led me in to go back to school. I earned my
Mm.
degree. And during all of that, I was taking lots of classes on mediation. And at this time, which was a few years ago, there was not really a term for community engagement, and volunteerism was not thought of as the way that it is now. And it definitely wasn't exemplified as something that was necessarily a positive thing.
Mm.
And so as I started working through different positions, ending up in a smaller city, creating their volunteer program from kind of the ground up, and really saw people at their best who were much more qualified, educated, small business owners who were coming to the city saying, "How can I help the police department? How can I
Mm.
help the fire department?" And they had all these skills and resources, and they were not there to shred paper.
Right.
They were not there to just answer the phones. They had valuable things that they could then bring to the table. And that really helped me to start to create programs that were more focused on leveraging the tools and the resources that they had and cost saving measures for organizations instead of always relying on a staff member to be able to provide those things. And really from there, I moved into a larger city where I led community engagement for all of the neighborhoods and area agencies that were there. And I think the thing about community engagement and civic engagement, when you're looking at municipalities, that sometimes people forget is the people that you are really going to be engaging with are the local volunteers, because
Mhm.
they're the ones that have the time to come to the board and commission meetings or serve on those boards, to come to the city council meetings, to come to a park and rec event or to a public meeting. And so you really want to be able to talk the talk of a volunteer and not be over their head, not make them feel like they're not qualified, because again, a lot of times they are more educated, more equipped with things than you do. And so treating them like the subject matter experts that many of them are, I think has been a real game changer for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think volunteerism is important in today's world in particular?
I think that COVID taught me and a lot of people why volunteerism is so important. I think there was a complete shift and change in once we all had to do things virtually or completely were cut off and we didn't even have that as an option. I think that people started to realize I miss seeing somebody's face. I miss giving somebody a hug. I miss understanding what the context of something is that they're going through. I miss just being able to have the luxury of going to church or going into work and having coffee with someone. And for me, volunteerism is key to communities getting back into that in a comfortable way. There's
Mhm.
still a lot of people that are working remotely or hybrid positions, and they have not gotten engaged in their communities. They don't feel like they're a part
Mhm.
of their neighborhoods and of their extended neighbors. They don't know their next door neighbors.
Mhm.
Even the term community is different now than what it used to be. Our
Mhm.
community now could be 2 people that we're online with. It's not necessarily the neighborhood and the people that you would go across the street for to pick up a package. And I think getting people engaged in something they genuinely care about and not something they're told to do, but that they really care about, they're invested in, that is the way to get them more engaged overall in the community. And volunteering is just that one little aspect of that. I think the
Mhm.
other piece of that is financially, and COVID brought that to light as well. I think most organizations, especially nonprofits, and a lot of our cities as well, are struggling financially to try to get the sponsorships and the philanthropists to continue to offer up funding in the way that they used to. And I think the more that we can leverage the existing talent that's out there for people who are willing to volunteer, I think that is really being the best stewards that we can of all the funding that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard 2 things. One is around just volunteerism as a place to plug into community and get
Yeah.
connected for folks who may feel like they're not yet connected. The other is just the sustainability of, purpose-driven orgs, whether they be public sector or
Yeah.
private charities, and really helping. I think also for funders, it shows them when there's a tremendous amount of volunteer engagement, it
Mhm.
shows that cause is important to that community, and it can be, in addition to the sort of in-kind contributions you might put in your grant proposal, the
Yeah.
fact that this many people wanna support this cause shows a funder that it is a deeply loved cause and could do more, even more with additional
Absolutely.
funding. It's not about replacing staff per se.
Mm.
Let's shift gears and talk about your book.
Mhm.
Nobody Starts Ready. What inspired you to write it, and what did you learn in the process? As a fellow author, I'm to my editing stage. I'm down to I've got 11 chapters. I've got everything figured out. I've been through the developmental edits, and now I'm getting into, I'm re-editing the chapters. I'm really pumped, but it's a marathon to write a book. So what sparked you, and what'd you learn in the process?
So I think that the main thing was whenever I created Community Positive, which Community
Mhm.
Positive is just an online free resource where I went out and did interviews across the United States of, like you said, public servants and volunteers to hear their why. Why and what is your motivating factor? And what do people need to know about the value of volunteering, about the value of serving in local government? And as I kept doing that, there were just certain themes that kept coming over. And I was
Mhm.
very surprised at some of the things that I kept hearing that were very similar, whether it was a city manager or someone who was a Sunday school teacher. But
Mhm.
the big thing that I kept hearing was people never felt like they were qualified, that they had the right
Mm.
background, that maybe they would even be welcome, maybe they had a bad experience previously. It wasn't that they didn't care about their community or a specific organization, but they, for whatever reason, were saying, I'll wait until, the kids are grown up. I'll wait until I'm retired, or I'll wait until this job, or I have more knowledge, or I feel better, or I know the right person. All of these things. And as I was interviewing these people, they just said, at some point, we just had to do it. But it was usually because someone said, hey, I see that you are really good at this, and it would be great if you would help with this. Instead of thinking that everyone's going to raise their hand when I say I need volunteers or I put out a public press release and say, hey, we need this. It's investing the time in people that you see and that you come across to say, I think you could do this. I think that you would bring real value to this. Those are the stories that I kept hearing. And how they met these people, how they came across their paths, and what led those different steps to where they were now. Every single time that I talked to someone and I would say, "What was the one person or the one moment that you can go back to say, this thing happened, or I met this person, and at this moment I knew." Didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, didn't know what the job was going to be, but I knew that in some way, shape, or form, I was going to be serving.
Mhm.
When I asked them, every single one just stopped, had to think for a few minutes, and then they would tell me these stories. And every single time I would say, does that person know that because of them,
Ah.
you are the city manager of the fifth largest city? does this person know that because of this, you're teaching fifth graders now? And most of the time they didn't. A lot of times it was family members, but it wasn't always.
Huh.
And it's just, and it really did make me think, especially with our families, oh, it was my mom, it was my dad, it was my grandfather. But they never really had that conversation of, but did you really know what an impact that made? And so that was really one of the catalysts for the books is that there are all these stories out there that people are not aware of that they're small. Some people
Mhm.
may think they're insignificant. Someone took the time to really cast a vision for someone or encourage someone to be a part of something or to not ignore the person that's always complaining about everything because you don't want to
Mhm.
know what the root cause of that really was. Involving all of those people, if they knew those stories, they can see themselves in that and then they can figure out should I maybe get involved in volunteering? Maybe I do need to be a public servant. Is this my calling, or do I just need to know the name of my neighbor next door?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because this is an aspect of volunteerism that is not really talked about that often and it's not factored into our, as a sector, our strategies for attracting volunteers.
Mhm.
So, what I mean by that is, there's a lot of talk about, oh, we need to talk about the impact of volunteering to the community. And if we're able to quantify that better, then more people will volunteer. Maybe people who've already decided to volunteer and they're selecting between organizations,
Mhm.
or there's some, event that's happening like, a natural disaster that
Right.
sparks and they're like, okay, yeah, this impact's going to be, immediate. We also think about when we think about attracting volunteers to our organizations, we think about, I do a lot of training and do communications audits and look at organizations and how they're messaging, who they're messaging to,
Mhm.
what their onboarding process and application processes are, how to make these a lot more streamlined, how
Yes.
to really welcome people more, in the right way.
We make it complicated.
Yeah, we make it way too complicated. But this aspect of why people get involved, we also do training and we understand and there's research on lots of research on volunteer motivations and what motivates people.
Mhm.
But the spark at the impetus of I've decided, yes, I do
Mhm.
want to make a difference in some way, that at that nexus, that kind of like spark and that place where, it's someone who talked to us about our capabilities and reassured us that we had capacity and we had something to offer.
Yeah.
That's I talk about lack of confidence a lot in my training, and I say, that's one of the number one reasons people don't volunteer is they don't have
Yeah.
confidence. They don't think because you use all your jargon in your organization, and they're like, I don't know what all these acronyms mean,
No.
and people think even leaders. I've worked with, and volunteered with leaders who come from like they have a PhD, they ran
Mhm.
teams, and all of a sudden they're leading a volunteer group and they're like being very, self-conscious, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? You have a lifetime of work
Yeah.
experience. Just because you're retired doesn't mean it went out the window. Have you led meetings before at work?" Similar concepts apply.
Right.
So, I love this idea of exploring when that notion came into being.
Yeah.
So, you talk about the myth in the book of that leaders are, there's a myth that leaders are quote unquote born ready, right?
Yeah.
That we come out of the womb and we're like either a leader or we're not. Either you got it or you don't.
Right.
And I can guarantee you that that's not the case because when I started leading, I was awful at leading. I mean, I
Mhm.
made so many mistakes. How did you discover, through your conversation, the confidence often follows action rather than precedes leadership? So people were telling you their stories, they were telling you about their lack of
Mhm.
confidence. Was there anything else you learned in these conversations? Why people are delaying getting involved
I
or what fears are holding people back?
Well, I think we are in a very first of all, it was a pattern. Every single person.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I literally the people that I every person that I interviewed, like the first 100 were people that I had direct relationships with. So I'm calling them because I know them about for this very specific thing. I worked with them with this project or with this organization. So when I'm asking them about their favorite stories and their whys and how did you start to do this, I'm assuming they're going to answer in a certain way. Never. They didn't ever talk about the things that I thought they were going to, but the pattern of I did not have that confidence that really confused me because these are professionals in
Mhm.
whatever organization that they are. And for them to be saying that they just suddenly decided or someone encouraged them to show up to do it, and that by continuing to do it, trying out other opportunities, that is what actually was the byproduct and gave them that confidence. Are the things that we're so challenged with now is, 20 years ago, everything was not on the internet. People didn't
Mm.
see everything that you possibly ever thought, said, or anything. We weren't on our phones like we are now. So if there was a challenge or a problem with an organization or locally, you didn't know about it unless someone told you about it. Now we seem to know everything about everyone and every challenge that's out there. And so what I kept hearing were the people that said, you know, I sometimes people just want to talk about everything. They want to debate it out. They look on their phone for an hour and they're scrolling and they're assuming that that's actually doing something. It's doing nothing. But they don't have the tools to understand that if they just stepped outside their front door, went somewhere within their sphere, their community, and said, "Hey, I want to help out. What can I do? What are the needs that you have?" People would be just ecstatic because that does not happen,
Yeah.
especially in local government. There are so many boards and commissions and working groups and different things that are happening. People show up to complain at a city council meeting, but what they're not doing is going up to a city council member and saying, "Hey, my name is Catherine. I just wanted to introduce myself to you." That's it. They
Yeah.
don't do that and start that
Right.
relationship so that, hey, at least they have a bug in their ear that I am a person that exists in their
Sure.
sphere of influence. They're gonna see me somewhere else, and then maybe I'm gonna be that person that they think of for something. Or when there is a challenge in my neighborhood, I'm upset about a zoning issue, or I'm concerned about whatever thing is being built. One, she knows who I am by face, and she's gonna see me as a friendly. It's
Yeah.
not I'm coming just to complain, but how can we work on this together? And so I feel like the more that we start looking into that and helping people be able to build that confidence, that is the thing that just kept coming out over and over. It's all about equipping people to feel like they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like, well, it doesn't almost. What's bringing to mind to me in terms of strategy. If I'm listening and I'm saying, okay, yeah, we know volunteering's nice.
Mhm.
Okay, now we're understanding that the reason one of the main barriers to volunteers, or to even starting the idea of volunteering at that early, way upstream from
Mhm.
like going to websites or going on
Yeah.
Idealist and looking for opportunities, or going on your local city or county website and looking for volunteer opportunities.
Yeah.
Before that even happens, there's a sort of a nascent period, a period of potential, a period of people making like that aha moment happen, right? And the aha moment, it feels like to me, if I was thinking strategically, and I often do, and advise people on this,
Yeah.
thinking strategically, I would think to myself as a communicator, well, wow, my messaging needs to be about what does it take to volunteer at minimum? What do you need to have? And I
Exactly.
often advise people like lower the bar, and put it in your messaging. Like
Yeah.
all it takes is a smile and a friendly disposition to be a greeter at our hospital. It's
Yes.
all it takes is a smile. You have a smile, right? And then it also, doubles down on the idea that storytelling and telling those stories, not so that people necessarily see the story in the way the organization sees the story. The organization is listening to the story, or
Mhm.
telling the story and thinking about the impact. The
Yeah.
potential community member who's on that little nexus of the aha moment, they're listening to the story. They're saying, "Oh, if they could do it, I could do it." it's a completely different relationship to the story. And when we say storytelling, like writ large in the nonprofit sector, we're often thinking stories of impact,
Of
right?
course.
But it's also about the volunteer's experience. So it's almost like you want to share testimonials of volunteers' emotions around volunteering, right?
Exactly. And the impact that it had on them. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest point. I interviewed someone who said that they as a youth, they had volunteered at a local camp.
Mm-hmm.
And as the year went through, they kind of, escalated her role, and so now she's over some of the volunteers that are there, but she's still, like, 18 years old. She's an attorney now for a city, and what she told me was during that experience, when she was dealing with kids and she would see them coming in from foster care and they were supposed to be there for that week, they had shoes that didn't have the soles, they had
Mm-hmm.
clothing that did not fit them. Though she saw things like that, that impacted her to say, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, but I know that it's going to be serving people in some way. Now she's with affordable housing. That's what she works with
Yeah.
as an
Mm-hmm.
attorney because she saw that people had a need that she never experienced in her own life. And it
Right.
doesn't matter, we say sometimes privileged and that we are all privileged to some degree. No matter how low that we started, there's always someone that might need a little bit more. And sometimes it takes us getting outside of our own little bubble to be able to see that. And when we're telling those stories about these volunteers, yes, it's the impact on the organization. And of course, we're going to look at data and end of the year reports. But what has that done? Has the relationship that we've built with this volunteer done to change their life?
Right, right. Yeah. So when you're advising or talking to or just communicating with volunteers and these newer leaders, how do you coach them to full potential? You talk about imperfect first steps.
Yeah.
What how do you get people once they say, "Aha, maybe I could do this." We want to move people from first of all, "Aha,
Yeah.
maybe I could do this," to "Aha, yes, I can do this."
Yeah.
And then, yes, I can do this, and actually, I can do more than I ever thought. That's kind of moving to the next leadership level.
Right.
What what are you kind of doing to coach people along that? Or what are you saying? What advice are you giving folks?
Well, I think that as volunteer leaders, whether you are a volunteer in that role or if you are a paid, because we have both, I think our expectations have to be a little bit different than maybe what they used to be. Especially as we take classes and we become certified and we have all these things. We forget sometimes that the person that is coming in to volunteer, you kind of said, they don't know acronyms. They don't know the terminology. They don't understand that everything that they're doing might be dissected by a supervisor somewhere else. They don't understand that we're looking at how to quantify the hourly rate of a volunteer. They don't care about any of those things. What they care about is, am I being valued whenever I walk in the
Mhm.
door, or is this just a waste of my time? And so the what I talk to leaders about is change the way that you're putting your energy into relating with people in that it's not about the end result. It's not necessarily even about this orientation training and the background checks and all the forms and all of those things. It's about how are you going to get them started? What is that initial time that you are spending with them, whether that is online? What does your website look like? That first page, is that a welcoming opportunity to people?
Mm,
Does it scream to you, oh, I can make a difference here? Or is it just numbers and data and this is a list of all the volunteer opportunities and here's the qualifications and you must be available for this, this, and this? I'm not even gonna look at that.
yep.
That if someone, not that this happens very often, but if someone actually comes to your organization in person and says, "Hey, I would love to help out. What kind of opportunities do you have?" Who is that first person that's going to be making that impression on them? Do they know what a volunteer is? Do they know what it means to what kind of things are we really looking for? For example, city governments. whenever a lot of times people will come to city government, they'll just randomly be maybe at a city council meeting and they're signing in, they're going to be doing the comment cards. The person sitting at that desk probably does not know the answer to this question, but if they say, "Hey, if I wanted to get more involved and I wanted to serve on this commission, what would I need to do?" It's our job as leaders to make sure that anyone that is coming in contact with the public that is a representative of our organization, that they are our ambassadors
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
telling them that they're looking for people intuitively. "Oh, I see that you've been coming here. You come to all the meetings. Have you thought about doing this? Oh, I saw the way that you guys did this together. I
Mhm.
saw. I This was so great. I appreciate that you did this. Have you thought about making sure that the I think the ambassador thing is such a big thing to me is for our organizations. The more we tell everyone internally the why that we need volunteers and that it's not a number, that it's not a quota, that it's not a cost savings, but this is the real why, but through the storytelling, showing the impact and not just putting it out there for the external audience. When we can do that, then you're going to have the ambassadors that are going to drive people to want to be a part of your organization. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges across the board in organizations I see cities, nonprofits, churches. They're not thinking about the existing staff as their ambassadors that need to know really what a volunteer is,
Mhm.
what the
Mhm.
process looks like, how hard is it, what are the true needs. Because unfortunately, I mean, I love volunteerism, but unfortunately, that word is not always seen as a positive thing internally.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think, "Oh, that means I gotta train somebody. Oh, this is gonna be more work. I have to watch them. I have to do this." Whatever. If those are the people that might be temporarily in charge of someone who would be doing something, they don't need to be there. That is
Yep.
not the right role for them. And so
Yep.
picking those ambassadors and making as many people as you can as possible, that is really one of, I think, the keys to getting people, especially with the younger generation. They really want to help. They want to make a difference. They want to make an impact. But it takes about one time of someone acting like what they're doing doesn't matter, they will never come back.
Yeah, and not to just to that organization, often to not to volunteer at all because they're like,
Exactly.
volunteerism isn't for me, obviously. I it makes me also think about your ambassadors. We do a lot of training on ambassadorship around training your coworkers, but more training your volunteers. So I
Yeah.
love that you called out your coworkers as well. Like everyone in your organization should be able to represent your organization across all the opportunities, whether
Yes.
it's financial contributions, volunteers, etc. I remember a volunteer. I was talking with one of our volunteers when I worked at a state agency, and we were out doing Medicare education for Medicare and Medicaid out in the community. And a certain team had a lot of volunteers on their team. And I said, how do y'all, I worked with various counties. I was traveling around a lot training volunteer teams. And I said, how did y'all recruit so many people? And they said, oh, it's all word of mouth. And here's how we do it. So they would be out in the community talking about, Medicare enrollment, Medicare Part D, prescription drug benefit, whatever, so that beneficiaries could know what their steps were and their options were.
Yeah.
And, Medicare's not an easy government program to navigate. For those of you who aren't there yet, I mean, I'm not there yet, but we'll soon be. It's complicated and it really frustrates people because they've paid money into this their whole life out of their paycheck and they expect to have the service when it's
Yeah.
supposed to happen. But they don't know, and it's a pocketbook issue because there's a variety of options. It's complicated. But so you might have people who are grumpy when they come to these meetings, and not because the volunteers had anything to do with Medicare policy,
Right.
but they are the spokespeople, to educate people. Once people settle down, they start to realize these volunteers are there. They're community education volunteers. They're there to help. And people will get really interested. And certain people in the audience would start asking a lot more questions. They really leaned into it. They were asking smart questions. And so, our volunteers were always in teams. So one volunteer, their job was to go over to anyone who was super interested or had body language or facial expression with that they were really kind of really interested. And they would say, it seems like you're so interested in this topic. Have you ever thought about volunteering? We are always needing people like us to
Yeah,
help others in the community. And that's the primary way that
it
they
is.
did their recruitment. And it
Yeah,
was the ambassadorship, and it was not starting with, "Hey, we need somebody to come down and do presentations. We don't have enough people to do presentations
yeah,
next month. Here's a clipboard. Could you write down your name?" Wasn't it was, "Hey, you seem like
yeah,
a person, a kind of person, a person like us who does things like these."
right.
Right? And
'Cause you're
it's a
passionate about it, and they wanna be a part of that too then.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
really I think the nuance of it is what people may be missing. Like, they may say, "Well, we do an ambassador program, it doesn't work." Well,
mm.
you're not approaching it maybe in the right way.
I
Let's
do
take
think that there's a
Oh, go
lot
ahead.
of organizations that I've been a part of too, where I could be talking to someone to a peer about something, and the term volunteer would come up, "Is there an opportunity for that?" And they would actually say, "I didn't know we had a volunteer program." And I
Oh,
can't tell you how many times I've been a part of something, and I'm like, "How do you not know? We screen this. We tell everyone." Who
right.
are you? It really there's no such thing as talking about it internally too much, because
Yeah.
there's always someone that doesn't know, and if that person tells someone else, "No, we don't have any opportunities like that," that's a missed opportunity.
Yep. Yep. Or just let me get you connected with somebody who can talk about the perfect opportunity for you and what you're
Exactly.
interested, your time commit, what you time availability and all that. Let me
Yeah.
get you connected with our volunteer coordinator because I just want to make sure,
Yes.
you have so much passion around this and I think you'd be awesome for us. It's that little reassurance and impersonal invitation that can
Absolutely.
make all the difference. But you have to invite a lot of people to get a lot of people to volunteer.
Yeah. If they think it's a cattle call,
Yeah, forget it. I mean,
you
how
don't
many
need me.
times have you been in a meeting where the clipboard gets handed around and it comes back empty? I mean, come
Yes.
on. I mean, I've seen that a million times on my own committees.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break. And afterwards, let's talk about some volunteer leadership stories, at least one. So let's take a pause from my conversation with Catherine Huckaby on volunteer leadership stories. We will be right back. And when we get back, we're going to get some inspiration flowing for y'all if you haven't felt it already. All right. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, friends, have you ever felt overwhelmed and unable to focus on the right things at the right time? Maybe you're not even sure where to put your time and energy to get the most traction with your volunteer program. Well, guess what? We've got a tool that can help you. It's called the Volunteer Strategy Scorecard. In about 3 minutes, you can get a PDF report that helps you understand where your gaps are, where you can focus energy to get big traction, and what your maturity levels are across 5 domains of volunteer engagement. It's a super cool tool. It's taken us a while to get it out, so I'm really excited it's finally found its way into the world. I hope you'll check it out. Just click on the link inside the show notes or in the link in the comments below and get started. Again, it only takes 3 minutes, and then you can get a lot of clarity on your next steps. Okay, y'all, we're back with a conversation on volunteer leadership stories with Catherine Huckaby. And if you were not inspired prior to the break, you will be now because we're going to talk about real lives changed through volunteerism. So, Catherine, share with us a story of a volunteer that just personally touched you that you thought was pretty amazing. What obstacles did they, come up against to their volunteering? How did they overcome them? And what was the ultimate impact of their volunteering on them and the community?
So one of my favorite, I love looking at people whenever they were younger and how that impacted them to become volunteers. And Karina is one of my favorites. She is in Texas, and when she was 12, she was close enough to her local library so that she could walk to the library. And so she would go there every afternoon, and someone said something to her about the fact that there was a teen volunteer program. So she decided to sign up. It wasn't something she went there to do, it wasn't something that she had planned to do, but someone that worked at the library encouraged her to sign up. She was also one of the only Hispanic teens that was in the volunteer group. She said that At that time, she felt isolated in her community somewhat, being, again, one of the only Hispanics, and when she joined that group of volunteers, they immediately welcomed her. She felt like she was appreciated and loved. The only obstacle that she had was just how ordinary that it was, and that how easy it would have been for her to never no one to ever ask her to volunteer. There wasn't a dramatic moment, there was nothing that screamed, "This is gonna be a future leader," but staff around her noticed her skills, they talked to her, and she continued to volunteer for several years well into her teens. Additional staff started taking her under their wing. You know, you should go to college. You should think about maybe a job in local government. Did you know that there's jobs in volunteerism? People just kept repeatedly encouraging her and really kind of pouring into her and saying, "Do you see the things that other people don't see about you?" Today, she's a volunteer resources manager for a city in Texas. And the programs and the training that she's been a part of has helped to really make an impact over hundreds of thousands of people. And it all started because at 12, she decided just to show up at a library, and someone noticed that she kept coming back day after day. So, what can we do to encourage her?
So I think I might know this, Karina.
You do, I bet.
I'm like, listen to this story. And I'm like, this is Karina Sadler.
It
She's one of
is.
our guest advisors inside the
Yep,
Impact Lab.
I
So she
know.
has not only become a volunteer coordinator, she now has global impact
She
through the
does.
Impact Lab as a trainer.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. When I was
Did
hearing
you
your
know
story,
that
I'm like,
about
I
her?
think I know this volunteer. That's so awesome. So you too, as a volunteer, can have a global reach. That's
Exactly.
fantastic. We love her at Volunteer Pro.
Yeah.
So, tell us another story of another volunteer. We love hearing these volunteer leadership stories.
So there is another Toby. Every time I look at your last name, I'm thinking it's a different Toby. This is she's also she spells it with an I too. So so today Toby's an executive director and a former board trustee in Fort Worth. But long before any of that started, she was in 5th grade and she decided that she really wanted to clean up her neighborhood. So it was an Earth Day. They had just started celebrating those. And she really decided that she wanted to do an aluminum can drive. And her parents were like, okay, do whatever you want to do. She didn't have a committee, she didn't have funding, no one gave her permission to do anything. She didn't go to school and say, "Hey, I want to do this." She decided she was going to do it herself. So she asked all of her friends and she said, "We're going to be here in the woods near my house." That probably doesn't sound good, in the woods near her house, but she was there. She's waiting on a Saturday and she started to really think, okay, maybe no one's going to come and maybe this was stupid and maybe they're not going to believe that this is anything important. She said whenever she got there that she saw about 50 kids that showed up. And her
Wow.
dad was there with her, and he was just shocked that she was able to get that many kids to show up. She says, I had ADHD, and that laughing and moving things around and being a part of a lot of activity was probably one of the things that kept her out of trouble as a kid. But that tiny, unofficial kind of program act really planted a seed for her, and from that moment on, she said that it was really a lifetime of community leadership, elected office. She didn't wait for an adult to tell her that she should organize something. She just decided to do it and figured out a way to bring her friends along.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. And all along the way, there are folks creating these sparks. We
Yes.
all have the opportunity to being observant and calling people out, not out, but like calling them to, I like
Yes.
this way of thinking about it, calling them to their special skills. And everybody, this is the other thing, I really like people to understand that, like, we're not looking for superheroes. We're looking for regular folk,
Yes.
and every regular person has a particular quality. So it's almost like you could start this conversation with anyone.
You could.
Anybody in your life or anybody you see who is willing to lean into something just a little bit, or it just demonstrates an interest in something, there is probably a service opportunity associated with them. So it's almost like we really need to widen our lens
Mhm.
when we're looking and at potential in the community and make it part of our everyday. Whoever, like it's almost like you're an ambassador for volunteerism in general.
Yeah.
I'm attuned to volunteerism because I'm a volunteer management expert.
Mhm.
And I see volunteers everywhere. I'll be in
Exactly.
an airport, and I'll
Yeah.
be walking by, and I'll say to my husband, "That person's a volunteer," because there were, and I'll walk up and I'll say, "Hey, are you a volunteer?" And they're saying, "Yes, I am." I said, "Well, how long you been volunteering?" Sometimes I'll just like chit chat a minute, and then I'll say, like, "Awesome, I love that." I don't say anything about what I do and who I am. I just
Yeah.
say, like, "You know what? Awesome, thank you so much for everything you do," and just move on. It's just something I think we need to get out of, like, looking down into, like, a very insular
Yeah.
way of doing volunteer recruitment to looking out into the world and seeing potential at every turn,
And
and
every
regardless
age
of
too.
age.
Every age too. I love whenever I hear city councils or different city leadership that are saying, we need to do a youth council. We need to do a youth group that's
Mhm.
going to come in and be a part of this. These are all volunteers, and these kids have so many good ideas. They're living in a world that we are not in, that we quite frankly do not understand, even if we have kids that age. And they want someone to ask them, "What do you think? What should we do?" They're gonna own these cities and to be responsible for them in 15 years. We need to equip them to know
Yeah.
how it's run, what is the process for things, and to start sharing their feedback about how they can make it better.
Yeah, it's a lot shorter. As you age, time goes faster, I feel. And it's a lot shorter time than you realize that a 15-year-old's gonna be a 30-year-old.
And if we don't train them and mentor them and genuinely care about their opinions, I have been a part of conversations where sometimes I can hear myself saying to one of my children, "Well, that's not the way that I did it," or "We did this," or you hear things and then you want to take those words right back immediately because you know how that sounds. This is not the same world it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But start looking back 15, 20 years. The kids right now, these are kids that grew up in COVID. They did not
Right.
have the same experiences of community or even classroom learning. And now they're going into a world as teenagers and young adults, and they're trying to navigate interpersonal skills that maybe they didn't learn in the same way. They
Mm,
did not have opportunities to volunteer because everything was shut down,
mhm.
not even go to church in some instances. And so it's almost like we have to play catch up and again give them permission to mess up, to volunteer somewhere and say, "Oh, I don't want to do that. That was not a good fit." It's okay. Go
Right,
find something else. But they're
right.
so afraid of failing and disappointing or not being good enough. And sometimes we got to get out of our own way enough to really encourage these kids and young adults to mess up like we got to, where it
Right.
wasn't always front and center.
So, do you think there's a generation gap in terms of, the level of grit, I guess I would say?
Mhm.
I think for myself and the way I was raised,
Yeah,
very working class on my mom's side, very grit. We were latchkey. My husband and I laugh about us being latchkey kids. Like everybody
exactly.
was at work. Our parents were at work. We came home, fixed our own, whatever our snack was going to be. We
Mhm.
all had chores around the house. I did the family laundry every weekend. I mean, we all had, like,
No
real
play
chores.
dates.
Yeah, nobody drove me to soccer games. I had to
No.
figure out who I was gonna carpool with. My mom
Yeah.
didn't call around and find me. And we see that as a source of pride,
Mhm.
but it was also a source of necessity. The skills that we developed, I can organize myself to the nth degree because
Yes.
I did that starting at age 12 or 13 because of necessity. My parents were out of the house working, even on the
Mhm.
weekends. So when you think about that value, we tend to put that on other people,
Mhm.
young people. Well, how come they're not leaning in? How come they're not getting over it? How come they're
Yeah.
complaining? How come they're not following through? And you're pointing out something that I think people don't maybe realize that it could be, in some cases, the fact that people feel intimidated,
Oh, yeah.
or they feel like they might get it wrong, or they feel like they might, make a mistake, and that the reason they may not be showing up, maybe there may be some of that dynamic going on versus I don't care about the world and I don't care about anybody else and I don't want to be a responsible human being because I don't need to be. That's the way that young people are painted. And having worked in youth services
Yeah.
a lot of years in my career in nonprofits, I really tried to lean into understanding where people were coming from. But now that I'm out of it, I'm not working with young people every day. I don't get the bump up, and I don't have kids, so I don't have the
Yeah.
bump up of my biases being challenged directly in my face. So do you
Yeah.
believe that that's kind of might be what's going on, this sort of generational gap or misunderstanding?
Yeah, and I think it's our fault. I mean, I will
Mm.
take ownership. I really do. For a lot of different reasons. I'll say it's all my fault. Because I think that and I do go back to COVID, but I think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're gonna look back and go, "Oh, look at all the things that happened and that changed as a cascading effect because of that." But during that time, if you're looking at the kids that were in elementary school, middle school, high school, everything that they thought they understood in the world of rules and etiquette and what is okay to do, what is safe to do, no, don't do this, we've got space, all of those things were turned upside down and everyone was told to go home. And
Mm,
for a lot of people, that home environment was maybe not the best environment.
mm,
And a lot of times we say, I mean, even school teachers will say, kids that have difficult child homes may or experiences, sometimes going to school is the best place for them to be. And
mhm,
so we don't know what was going on. We have no
mhm,
idea what their experiences
mhm,
are. Were there, we don't know.
mm.
But for us to act like, oh, just get over it and move on, that's somehow, yes, that's what we do. We move on, right? But even the conversation now, my son is graduating college and he's like, "Mom, what am I going to do because of AI?" And I'm like, "You pivot." That's what I think
Right,
because we have the internet and we have this, and all these different wars and all these things. And you know what you do? You just keep going because you don't know what's going to change because everything changed all the time. But
right.
for this generation, think about how scary it is for them at their age to think, can I have a family? Am I going to have a job? Career? What is that even going to look like? Retirement? Any of those things, because they've got parents like us who are maybe getting closer to thinking about, are we going to retire? Are we going to do that? And they're hearing about all the things that we're saying. I think that if we don't stop and say, I get this, I hear it, and all these things can be true, but now
Mhm,
how can I help you? How can I equip you? Some of the smartest kids that I have met are working like in Mansfield, Texas. They're volunteering on a youth council. If you want to wonder about the youth of today and whether they've got do they have the grit? Do they have the fire in their belly to be able to do the things that are going to matter for generations to come? Go and talk to the kids that are like that. They have more thoughts about how things can be improved. They're not talking about diversity in the same way that our generation did. They're
mm,
talking about it on a scale that goes beyond race or ethnicity. They're talking about open spaces and they're talking about, this is how you would really be able to bring someone into local government to be a city manager. And they didn't go into serving in a youth council because there was a flyer that said, come be a part of youth council. They went to a city event that was a fun event for youth, and different people said, oh, you should think about going and being a part of
mhm,
university. What's
mhm,
that? It's going to tell you about some things in the city. From there, somebody said, hey, you should think about being on the youth council.
mhm,
What's that? Multiple people that were part of that said, you know what? I just did it for just so I put it on the college application. Then you get in the middle of it and you realize that city council members and city managers are listening to you. that they brought them to the table and said, we're looking at a comprehensive plan about what this city should look like in 20, 30 years. What do you think?
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, is that happening in every city? Maybe not.
No.
Yes, it 100% should. They're going to be running these cities. But if someone's not seeing them, if organizations aren't giving them the opportunities to be seen, then we're never going to see all that potential. Someone's not going to see it if they stay in their house 24/7 and never go anywhere. But the adults that are around them need to say, "Hey, let's go do this. Have you thought about doing this?"
Yeah. Yeah. This has been a great conversation. And I think, there is, as I, get to a certain level in my career, I've been shifting a lot into more mentorship
Yeah.
roles and really, having worked with young people in the past and seeing the power of youth. I think given the right circumstances, y'all, if you want to learn about how to work with young people, I'm going to put a link to you. Just research youth adult partnership. It will tell you everything you need to know. I'll post a few resources in the show notes, but it will teach you how to, if you're wondering, because none of everything happens by design. You don't just bring a bunch of young people and say, "What do you
No.
think?" I mean, there's a lot of design work, and you have these
Right.
stages of like this event, and then this training, and
Mhm.
then this ask. It's a cumulative thing.
And parents.
Yeah, and parents and all that. But, if you really want to empower young people, just check out Youth Adult Partnership. So let's wrap up. But, let me ask you, after hearing so many volunteer leadership stories, Catherine, you have talked to hundreds of volunteers about their experience and their life cycle as a volunteer and into service, into government, into nonprofits, into just other types of careers. What do you believe is the number one thing that organizations can do right now to get this moving in the right direction if they feel like they're not connected enough, or they feel like they're not attracting the right volunteers, or they feel like they're not engaging communities in the way that they would like to? What's one thing you think they should be doing?
I think that probably the most important thing is to really invest in the kids. And I
Mm,
know that it is a whole nother animal. But when I'm saying kids, I mean 15 to 25.
mhm.
That needs to be your primary focus. One of the biggest traps that are happening right now in most organizations that require volunteers is leaning on the people that have always done it, and they are burning out, they are aged out, they deserve to be able to take a break without feeling guilty, or maybe their hands need to be taken off of something a little bit so that someone
Yeah.
else can have that opportunity. I think that if you are depending on exhausted people, that the face that you're putting out there is not the best face for your organization. And they deserve a break, and we deserve more new ideas and fresh
Mhm,
blood and opportunities. If we
mhm.
don't focus on that age group, no one else is going to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Catherine, this has been really fun just to hear some volunteer leadership stories, to talk about, how we might shift how we're, talking about and seeking volunteer talent in the community, thinking about, what kind of lens we should be viewing things with. One last question as we wrap up, I love to ask all my guests is, what are you most excited about in the year ahead?
I think that it's just having more conversations. Whenever all my interviews are done this way virtually for the most part, so I can record them, and seeing people in their minds and verbally walk through their experiences and thinking about things that they haven't thought about in 10 years or 20 years. It is so fun and so encouraging. And I love being able to talk about other people. Sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about ourselves and the things that we're doing, and I love being able to get away from myself and highlight what other people are doing. There's some great things out there that no one will ever know about. So I will continue to be able to do that. I don't think there's a magic number of the people that I want to be able to interview and talk to, and anyone that's interested in being a part of community positive and sharing their story, they just need to reach out to me, and I know you're gonna put that in the show notes, but I
Mhm.
love to hear stories. I think we have been able to do interviews with about 36 different states, people that have lived in 36 different states in the United States. So love to be able to get to all 50 and hear all the different experiences.
Awesome, awesome. So folks would go to communitypositive.com
Mhm.
and look for what on that webpage to help share their story.
So if they want to share their story, there's a contact page on there, and they
Okay,
can just click on the link or
okay.
contact. There's multiple on every single page. It'll say contact us. You can also join the email distribution list if you want to see the first interviews that are out. And if you have more questions about the book, it's communitypositive.com/ready.
Yeah. So everybody, get your hands on this book. It's called Nobody Starts Ready: How Ordinary People Make a Real Difference Where They Live. And Catherine's book is out now. You can go on the website. You can find it wherever you like to buy your books. And you can find Catherine on LinkedIn as well. We'll put all these links in the show notes. And just go grab that book for a little bit of inspiration. If you're feeling a little crispy, a little burnout, a little tired, sometimes it's good to read stories and just learn, reflect on why we're all in this business in the first place, which is helping people, helping volunteers grow, helping communities thrive, helping the people that our organization is set up to help. And sometimes we need to see outside of our organization for a little inspiration. And so I encourage you to go grab the book. So, Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a fantastic conversation. Gang, if you like this interview and you want to share it with a friend, I'd love that. Share it with a colleague or someone who could use a little inspiration. If you enjoy the pod, give us a star rating. We like 5 stars because we get in front of more people that way. And rate and review us. We'd love to hear more about what you want to hear on the Volunteer Nation podcast. And I will be taking a hiatus at some point this summer. Not quite yet, but I'll let y'all know when that's going to happen. It'll be my first time. We're up to like 220 episodes of
Oh, wow.
weekly episodes. So
No
I
break.
think I've deserved a break.
You deserve it.
But I want to stop, work on the book, and then come back with some new ideas for the pod. So, Catherine, thanks for joining me so much. Have a fantastic rest of your week. It's
Thank you
been
for
so
having
great
me.
to have you. And everybody else, thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place on the Volunteer Nation podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Volunteer Nation podcast. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review so that we can reach more people like you who want to improve the impact of their good cause. For more tips and notes from the show, check us out at tobijohnson.com. We'll see you next week for another installment of Volunteer Nation.